Back on the SportsMax Zone. Now, ever since the first World Football Cup kicked off in 1930, successive generations of football fans have become accustomed to witnessing the spectacle every 4 years. However, football's world governing body FIFA recently conducted a feasibility study, the findings of which will be published shortly. Now, regarding the proposal for the showpiece event to be held biennially instead of every 4 years, here's what FIFA President Gianni Infantino had to say regarding the issue.
Clearly defines when there are national team games, when there are club games in the interests of everyone. And this is part, of course, of this consultation process, which is, again, I repeat it, global, because it's very important, which is a sign of respect as well from FIFA to the entire world.
FIFA President Gianni Infantino. Already there's been a number of dissenting voices to this proposal. However, the idea seems to have found favour among a number of Caribbean territories. Quoted in the Jamaica Gleaner, president of the Caribbean Football Union, Randy Harris, the Barbadian, had this to say. In our region, we are not playing competitive football at the level of World Cup qualifying and trying to make it to the finals. We in the Caribbean would support a World Cup every 2 years. World Cup would bring an appeal to the players, officials and the general public that nothing else does. Now, President of the Jamaica Football Federation, Michael Ricketts, also weighed in on the issue, courtesy of the same published article. We just need, he said, to manage our time. I honestly think that it could work, and we need to, just from a national standpoint, play more football. Now, joining us to dissect this issue, international football correspondent Simon Evans. Simon, welcome to the SportsMax Zone again. We heard Gianni Infantino there and a couple of Caribbean voices giving their views on it. But a lot of things there are said by Infantino, potentially divisive in the football world. A lot of people will agree a lot with what he's saying, and a lot will very, very violently disagree with what he's saying. You're based in Europe. We get the feeling that the European big guns aren't too favourable or reacting favourably to a World Cup every 2 years. What say you?
No, they're not. UEFA's come out very strongly against this, as have the European Club Association and the World Leagues Forum, which represents all the big leagues around the world, but which is dominated obviously by the European leagues, the Premier League, the Bundesliga and so on. They've all come out against it, and UEFA President Alexander Seferin has even suggested that if this were to be pushed through at a FIFA Congress, because Infantino, they're referring to the number of federations supporting this, and of course FIFA is a one nation, one vote organisation. There's a chance of him getting this through, especially backed by some of the smaller federations. UEFA's president saying they would consider boycotting the World Cup if it was played every 2 years. So there's not much common ground there at all at the moment, and the Europeans don't like this idea at all.
Yeah, you know what? I heard a conflicting story coming out of FIFA over the past week or so. An initial report that suggested that the fans, based on the poll they had done, had hugely supported moving it to every 2 years. But there was some subsequent FIFA publication that suggested that it may not have been as overwhelming as they had originally said from a fan base. Was that a story you followed?
It was, yeah. I've been following this story very closely. I've been fortunate to listen to some of Arsene Wenger's presentations about it with the detail of what they want to do. But also, yes, that was a slightly misleading press release that FIFA put out, saying that a majority of fans would like to see the World Cup played more often than 4 years. Of course, surveys, it all depends how you frame the question, of course. What they didn't say was that of all the choices given, the most popular solution across the world was to keep it at 4 years. So conflicting data, really, and you can spin it either way. I don't blame FIFA for doing what politicians do and using a survey to back up their position. And their position is, despite Infantino talking about consultations and feasibility studies, their position is very much that they want to do this.
Yeah, and Simon, I tend to believe that less is more. Do you get the sense that having a FIFA World Cup every 2 years would water down the excitement and, you know, all the work that goes into an actual World Cup?
Yeah, there is a lot of people saying, especially people around UEFA and in European football, saying it would reduce the prestige of the tournament by holding it more often? And that question was put to Arsene Wenger on one of the media calls, and he said, well, if it's special because it's every 4 years, would it be even more special if we had it every 8 years? Is that what we should do? And he was suggesting that it wouldn't make any difference to it. And the argument he has for why they want to not only have a World Cup every 2 years, but also have the Euros and the Gold Cup and the Asian Cup and the African Cup of Nations, Copa America, all these, so that every summer there would be a major tournament. He says, if we don't organise a tournament, somebody else will, by which he's referring to the club tours that we see going on in the United States, the ICC competition, the Asian Cup, when Premier League teams go out there. FIFA doesn't like those things at all and sees it just as a way of clubs making money during the summer, which is a time when they think should be for national teams.
Right, and that's perfect that you ended it that way, because it brings me to my question. Do you think it's just a money-making business for FIFA, this World Cup every 2 years?
Absolutely, money is a factor in it. I don't think it's just that. I mean, there's ways they could make more money with less. I don't think, and they've actually said that their studies so far suggest they wouldn't double their money by holding it twice as often because the sponsorship deals wouldn't be as big. But undoubtedly, money is a big factor, and when we have to consider that, what Randy Harris is saying there from the CFU about the Caribbean nations, and the same applies to nations in lots of parts of the world, where the World Cup qualifiers are the only games really that can be properly monetized for federations in those countries. They're the time you get a TV deal, they're the time you can fill your stadiums where it really matters. And so there's going to be a lot of support that is based on finance as well. So, that's just a reality. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But, people are going to debate about whether the calendars are going to become too crowded. When are the players going to get rest in the summer? That's another factor to balance against the obvious commercial advantages of it.
Yeah, this is a fascinating issue, Simon, because there are so many interested parties here who, depending on which foot of shoes they are wearing, then their opinion will be one way. I hear the Europeans talking about protecting player welfare, when, as you pointed out, they flog the players to death with these interminably long summer tours to all parts of the world, and FIFA is saying, well, you're making money off that, and if we ask the players to play international football during that time, you say the players are unavailable and should rest, but you are still playing them there, so they are held on that point. Where I want to go with the discussion is this, Simon. Politically, I thought Infantino played a brilliant game with the idea of the 48-team World Cup, because, of course, everybody wants to play it. And those smaller countries, and it's one country, one vote at the FIFA table, as you noted, they want to play it. So they would support a president who wants to take FIFA in that direction. And I thought that solidified himself with the countries, and so he could never lose another FIFA election until the 48 World Cup became a reality. And now I see, Simon, another masterstroke with this idea of a World Cup every 2 years, and giving those same smaller nations, or those nations who have been a part of the World Cup once and not been for several subsequent tries after, giving them the opportunity to dine at football's high table once again, is more curry favoring with those smaller nations. And I think that politically, even if it does not fly, Infantino, Simon, can say, well, I tried to bring the Football World Cup every 2 years. The Europeans defied me. I am the man to take you into the future. Support me, and eventually I will get it done. I see this as a political masterstroke.
Oh, absolutely. Politically, it's a no-brainer for Infantino, really, because, even if the European opposition reaches the level of boycotts and threats and really risks a damaging split in football, and then Infantino might have to back away, even if that happened, as you say, he's been seen to be fighting for the nations in the Caribbean, the Asian nations, the African nations, and taking on the rich Europeans and standing up for the poorer parts of the world and so on. It's a no-brainer for him politically. He wins whatever happens. You're right. The only danger is that there's a balance here between the club and the national team game, and the clubs will turn around and say, when they're under pressure in these kind of situations, well, we pay these guys. You know, they actually work for us. They're our employees, even though it doesn't seem like it so often with the way that the agents operate and so on. And they could turn around and say, well, we're not going to release them for these games. You could get into some standoff situations like that. But again, that could only strengthen Infantino's position. He's in a very strong position in FIFA, I think, as long as he's seen to be the champion of the countries that we've just been talking about.
Yep, and that's what I mean by political masterstroke, because if it happens, he's a winner. If it doesn't happen, he's a massive winner because he tried to make it happen. The issue though, Simon, with the international footballing calendar, and I've taken a look at the women's calendar and of course the men's calendar. And yes, I'm agreeing with Arsene Wenger and company in saying that it needs tidying up. But I think that the addition of the Nations League, which gives quality competition between especially the European nations and nations in this part of the world outside of World Cup qualifying, is very, very, very good. But I see it as adding to the crowding and the congestion, and then the clubs and these summer tournaments. I think that is the straw that has broken the camel's back. So I'm saying I don't want a World Cup every 2 years. I'm sorry, but I'm saying I want a calendar that is more streamlined where players can get their rest. But I want to keep the Nations League, Simon. I want the Gold Cup to be played. I want the Copa America to be played. And I want to watch the Euros and then watch the World Cup every 4 years. Can I get harmony where all those things are concerned coming out of these talks?
Well, the interesting thing that I think a lot of people in the media who've been very critical of this have given some credit to Arsene Wenger for some elements of this with the calendar. The idea that the qualifications process, which goes on for a long, long time in Europe and South America especially, and in Asia, is a bit more streamlined in CONCACAF with a lot of countries getting eliminated very quickly. But his idea is, instead of having international breaks in October, November, September, and then March again, and then off to a tournament in June, let's play all the qualifiers in one window or two at the maximum. So he's talking about a mega window in October, for example, for Europe, where they would play all the qualifying games in October. You'd have no club football for 4 or 5 weeks, and you would play almost like a qualifying tournament for that. And then that's it. You go back to your club and you play the tournament in the summer, or at the most have another mini window in March. And I think a lot of people like that, because that to-in and throw-in that Infantino is talking about is a really valid point. The clubs don't like it, the players don't like it. You think about the South American players who are having to fly back on a Thursday or Friday from Brazil to land in London, get themselves up to Liverpool and then play a game. It is a crazy situation. So there is support for that. One question I said to Wenger is, why not do all that streamlining? And he's talking about having mandatory rest periods as well, which I think is a good idea. Why not do all that, but then don't have the World Cup every 2 years? Give players some rest. Keep it every 4 years, but streamline the qualification like you've been talking about. And then he comes back with the argument that, well, if we don't have a tournament, the clubs will do something else. So, and another idea that not to go on about my conversations with Wenger on these Zoom calls, but one thing I threw at him is their argument is this is about the development of the game and about spreading the opportunities around the world to countries that don't get to World Cups and so on. But the reality is that 70-75% of the teams who get to World Cups are the same ones every time. We know most of whom are going to be there. And so what are you doing for the next 48 who don't make it? My suggestion was, instead of having a World Cup every 2 years, have a World Cup and then have like a B World Cup, like an almost Europa League model of a secondary tournament where the teams, for example, think about the CONCACAF region, those teams that don't qualify for the World Cup, instead of having to wait 4 years for an opportunity, in 2 years' time, they go and play those teams who just missed out in Asia, just missed out in South America and Europe and so on. Now, it wouldn't be as great a commercial product, but if the aim is to develop the game, if that really is the aim, then that would be, I think, a more sensible way of doing it.
Yeah. I've already said to you what I hope to get from all of this, which is a further streamlined calendar like you with a 4-year cycle World Cup and rest for the players in the break. But one last thing before we go, Simon. The fact is this. When you consider the egalitarian principle that Wenger is preaching and which you just articulated in his answer to your last question, well, the other question you mentioned, he said, look, The fact is that I didn't get formal coaching until I was 19, and I want to create we want to create equal opportunities for footballers from all over the world. It's really rubbish. Everybody in the world, Simon, can't have steak and potatoes on their plate every night for dinner. Some people are going to have bread and fish. Some people are going to have bread only. Some people are going to have water only. It's a fact of life. We can aspire for everything to be equal in every respect. It won't happen. So don't tell me that changing the calendar in the way that you're proposing with a 2-year cycle World Cup is not going to create opportunities from a player from Burundi or a player from Curacao or from Guyana or Cuba to emerge and be the superstar at Manchester United or Man City or Liverpool. The cream always rises to the top, and these players have always emerged from some far-flung places over time and will continue to do so. And no shifting of the calendar is going to create the conditions where every country has an equal opportunity of producing the next superstar or the next teen sensation in world football. And for someone like myself, Simon, I find that reasoning to be a rather disingenuous and an insult of my intelligence and a waste of my time, frankly, to tell me that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't stand up because we know that when we get to the World Cup, what people actually want to watch, for all the talk about development and everyone's all in favour of that, what people want to watch is Germany versus Brazil. They want to watch Argentina against Italy. They want to watch those big games. And that's what we will watch because that's what always happens at World Cups. We hope that there will be over time, a Nigeria or a Cameroon or someone come through from Africa and really challenge there, and the same with Japan and so on. But it's very slow happening, which is why I think, it's not a bad idea to think out of the box and look at international tournaments for those countries that do just miss out. You look at in CONCACAF someone like El Salvador, which is a great football country, real passion, and they've produced decent teams over the years, but they don't get to the World Cup very often at all, and they're constantly playing the same teams. So you can see why maybe at some other kind of tournament, but the World Cup every 2 years, I have to try and keep myself relatively neutral reporting it, but I think it's going to continue to meet opposition in Europe for sure.
Yep. And the nuclear point is the point of the boycott, because of course FIFA rules dictate you have to release players for World Cup qualifiers. But if you've boycotted the tournament, then your employees can't then join the tournament. We'll talk much more about this, Simon. Let's hear what they've said. You know what? I noticed from Infantino's statement, he said 166 of the FIFA Association members, or about 80%, have voted in support of the plan to conduct the feasibility study. He didn't say that they have voted in support of the 2-year World Cup or that they are in support. He said they have supported the plan to check the feasibility of it. And I think it's very important for us to tell our viewers that is what he is saying, but he couched it in such a way to make it seem as if there's more support.
And that was widely misreported, unfortunately.
Absolutely, but I picked that up just now. Yeah. Thank you very much, Simon. All the best.
Study.
Yeah, man. All the best. Simon Evans there. So what say you? A FIFA World Cup every 2 years? Why?
Water down. I am not for it. I just think it would water down everything, and it would take away the fact that people actually train so hard and look forward to a World Cup.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it as it presently stands. I'm all for keeping it where it is.
All right, break time.